from Art is on his way, we're about 5 minutes late, but we will proceed on time. Our second agenda item is public comment, and I want to remind everybody that public comments, we listen, but we don't partake. The discussion, and they are limited to 3 minutes each. We will start with Colleen Wade. Welcome, Colleen.
You join me.
Okay. Hello, board members. I'm just here, I know we had our, as the legal proceedings continue regarding Roosevelt, as I am every time here representing the community, and just asking you to please consider, we always have options and opportunities, but it's been a long, continuing conflict of business priorities and points of view, but your community would really love partnership and opportunity to consider other solutions and ways that everyone can win for that property that don't include demolishing the building. And I've heard that from you a bajillion times, but I would just ask you, it's never too late, the building is still standing, and we would love to talk about other ways that we can support you and also support Keto. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next is Jen.
I didn't really have anything prepared this evening either, but I guess it's more of coming from the heart kind of a discussion, or rather, 1.2. But just to emphasize what Colleen has already said, that the building is still standing. I've rattled my brain about how to come up with a proposal that could be considered and how to put together a timeline to give you guys a chance to discuss what the building could be used for and how it's best utilized. But I need you guys are just as much a part of what that building could become as the community and the vested interest of the public is. So I want you to realize that it's easy for you to say, well, nobody's came to us with a great proposal, but really truly, if it's something that you want a vested interest in, because I think that would be what you would want, maybe like some type of 50-50 partnership, I'm just throwing things out there, it would be a good idea to have a discussion. And I think that you already have the names of the people that you would want to have those discussions with. I would be happy to be included in that, and I'd like to work together. I think that a collaboration between the nonprofit and whoever else we choose to work together with would be a viable solution for Roosevelt and the community, as well as the school district. And I also want to say thank you very much for the way that you guys handled the school district handled the situation with the Fire for the Family in West Bloomfield. It touched my heart to know that you guys reached out and did what you could. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, Lynn and I. Okay, so we're going to move on to I can't talk tonight. Agenda item number 3, mid-year school improvement and data review. And Mr. Scott Vaughn, Assistant Superintendent for Learning Services, will address the board.
Thank you, President Brickman. Thanks for having me this evening, board. Tonight we're going to, as we typically do at this time of the year, check in on our benchmark assessment data, specifically our NWEA data. We all know our strategic plan. I think when we look at this data and we talk about strategic and tactical next steps, one of the things that I always dial in is the experiences and tools that we provide students. And we always keep our eye on the prize of belief statements, which is that we believe fundamentally that all students can and will learn. And they'll continuously make growth. So I wanted to give a quick refresher of the NWEA MAP assessment, just some basic information. I think it'll help just ground us for tonight. So there's really 2 areas that we think about when we think about NWEA MAP. One is it measures growth in student learning. So you can think about this a lot like height, like kids will grow over the course of time. You can think about it in baseball terms if you're a sports person, like do you get more hits from one season to the next? You can even think about it like running a mile, like how far can you go to get to a mile? Can you run 3/4 of a mile? A mile. When we look at growth, the NWA will provide national growth projections for grade level. So they'll say like, hey, when we talk about the height and the distance, that's the RIT, that's the raw score that a student can get. And so a national growth projection, they'll give the average RIT growth for a grade level, NWA will give a projection, and then it'll show what West Bloomfield or any other school district is doing. It also includes the percentage of students that meet growth goals. So based on national norms, NWA will set goals for students that are reasonable and attainable, and they'll share the percentage of kids in a grade level in a class that meet those growth goals. Secondly, they'll measure student achievement. So in contrast to, let's just say, hits, the number of hits a player gets from one season to the next, this is more like batting average. In Major League Baseball, a good batting average is 300. That would be a good benchmark for a quality player. If you have a batting average of like 260, it's below that benchmark. So that's one analogy. Another way to think about it is, instead of how much distance you can have, how fast can you run the mile in? Maybe the benchmark is 6 minutes. That would be a pretty fast mile, I think, for all of us, although I'm getting close to it. So it measures that achievement piece. So one of the things that NWA does extremely well is it accurately projects spring state assessment proficiency scores for us within like percentages. So it's a very good predictor. It's also a good predictor of ACT and SAT. It will also provide percentile comparisons between us as a school district across grade levels to the rest of the nation for the term that is tested. So it'll show you where you sit compared to the rest of the nation in the percentile. And when we talk about percentiles, what we're really talking about is if they say first grade is in the 50th percentile for achievement, that means West Bloomfield scores 50th better than 50% of the districts that took the test in that term. So that's a bit of a refresher. So percentile is a word that you'll hear, RIT is a word that you'll hear, growth and achievement are not the same thing. One of the things that in our organization we always focus on is continuous growth for students. If they're not making growth, it's hard to get them to reach those achievement levels. Compare it to working out or running. You're not going to run a 6-minute mile overnight. It's the continuous conditioning over the course of time with the right type of training and supports that will get you to that point. So with that said, the major area of focus for tonight's presentation is going to be grade level growth. We're going to look at, did each grade level meet or exceed the NWA grade level norms for projected growth in the winter of 2025. And again, this is based on an average increase of a student's RIT score and grade levels, just like we talked about with height. In some cases, I'm going to give you some additional context as needed. So if a grade level did not meet or exceed that grade level projection that NWA set, why? Is there some other data that we should look at that would give us more of a story? And in some cases, I'll give you that tonight. In some cases, I'll give you cohort data for the percentage of students that met or exceeded their NWA growth goal. You all know that's one of our district goals. In some cases, I'll give you projected proficiency percentages for cohorts and grade levels, so achievement. And in some cases, I'm going to give you achievement percentile rankings. We could be here until 1 in the morning to really do an exhaustive. The purpose of that is not to get too deep in the weeds. That's what our building teams and our PLCs do. This is a 30,000-foot view. I'm also going to talk about a systems approach, how we are using intentional systems to strategically improve instruction over the course of time so that student growth and achievement accelerates. Recently, you saw the Eagles won the Super Bowl, right? They didn't do that by just going and picking the best players and signing million-dollar contracts. They did that through the draft and staying true to their vision. And the same way for us, if we embed the right framework and systems in place, over the course of time, we're going to continue to see positive results. But you'll also see some tactical steps as well. Because when you look at data, one of the reasons you want to look at data is what can we do right now that's a course correction? Not chasing the big shiny object or letting our hair fall out because we don't see a data point. But what are some simple things we can do this year while also staying true to our strategic systems?
Scott, can I interrupt you for 1 minute? I always do this when we have new board members, but when you do PLC, like, we're gonna have to explain like what things are. So PLC,
Yep, I'll get
can
there.
you explain? Okay.
Yep,
Thank
that's
you.
actually on the next slide.
Okay.
So, some long-term strategic action planning that I think is really important for us. In the spring of 22, we presented data. I think that was the first year that I was on this job. One of the things that we saw as a board and our district saw is low percentages of achievement. not places that we wanted to be. And so we knew that one of the most important things we could do is create some structures and frameworks to make sure that on a regular basis, we're evaluating the resources, the instructional mindset, and the tier 1 focus for our students. Because if the percent of proficiency is 40% of the grade level, that's not an intervention problem, that's a tier 1 problem in terms of what type of resources we're providing for teachers and what our instructional mindset is. So back at that time, we really delved deep into our curricular resource cycle and said, how do we get the most out of this cycle to make sure that we're impacting teachers? And so that cycle consists of an evaluation phase, where we evaluate the current resources that we have in any given content area. We look at achievement trends over the course of time. We get stakeholder perception data, including students and families and teachers. We start to develop some instructional non-negotiables based on current research and data that we see in our district. And then the next phase, the following year, is where you pilot programs. You start to implement those non-negotiables that we talked about in instruction, and you use that with some pilot resources. After that, you go into full implementation mode. You implement the resources that you've adopted, the instructional mindset, and then the following year you continue to monitor. You go through data cycles, continue to get stakeholder feedback, and then analyze and reflect. So that's a 5-year process, and it's like that for a reason. When you invest in a curricular resource, it takes a lot of money. And so if you're doing that for all the resources at the same time, we'd be broke, right? We can't sustain that. The other reason why you want to do that is workload and capacity. If you think about an elementary teacher trying to implement 4 different curricular resources, that would be next to impossible. So you have to build that out in phases. Speaking of those phases, our elementary math team is currently in the evaluation phase. They run a really great Bridges program. Don't freak out, just because they're evaluating, it doesn't mean that we're getting rid of it. But it is important to look at the achievement trends over the course of time. And it's also important to see if Bridges has any updates. And if Bridges doesn't, and we see a better resource out there, then we go after it. Secondary math is currently piloting 1 resource. Elementary ELA is piloting 2 different resources right now. And then secondary ELA is in the evaluation phase. So if you look, it just so happens that all 4 of our content areas are either in an evaluation or a pilot. That's not by mistake. That's by design based on the data that we saw when our team started to form. We knew it was very critical to focus on the framework and the tier 1 instruction so that we could see that systemic growth over time. In terms of immediate tactical action planning, these are the things that we do on a regular basis within our system that help us keep our eyes close on the data and the finger on the pulse of what's going on in our classrooms. So we do district-wide data protocols that are focusing on WA data in the fall, the winter, and the spring. The winter window is just closing, so those data protocols will ensue in the coming weeks for a lot of different groups. And on the next slide, I'll talk about that. Additional data will be collected and examined in these data protocols. So that could include learning environment observation data. That's where our team goes in and gets snapshots of what instruction looks like at any given time. That looks at-risk student data, demographic data, local assessment data. The reason we collect so much extra data at those different levels, in addition to NWA, is because one data point doesn't tell the entire story. It just tells part of it. So next steps that happen when we do those data protocols is we course correct. Based on the goals that we have in any given stakeholder group, we make course corrections. We add interventions if needed within the year that are reasonable and plausible to do. We action plan, we progress monitor. So Stacy asked me to explain, by the way, this right here just kind of gives a snippet of like when we collect learning environment observation data, these are different items that we collect and it shows charts over the course of time. So our teachers have access to that when we do these data protocols. So when we run a data protocol, we do it at a district level, a building level, a PLC level, and an intervention level. At the district level, the stakeholder groups include Ad Council, that's all of our administrators and central office staff, our LLT, which is our literacy leadership team, which is different stakeholders across all of the elementaries, and then Learning Services, my department. Another stakeholder group that does building level data protocols is our building leadership teams. Principals have teams of teacher leaders and ancillary staff that look at data. PLCs are professional learning communities. So in first grade at Greshko, there's a professional learning community that looks at data. At 6th grade, West Bloomfield Middle School, there's a language arts team that looks at data together as an entire team. And then another group is the intervention data protocols, and that's our Title I interventionists, our at-risk interventionists, and our building leadership teams. Because we don't want our interventionists to make decisions in silos. It's really important that there's a broad perspective there. The inquiry cycle for all, or the inquiry that we look at is different depending on the lens of the group. So at a district level, we say, hey, what are our objectives and key results for the year and the quarter, and how is it going with those? And are there some immediate adjustments that we need to make at a district level to improve? At a building level, very similarly, but more granular at their level, how are their goals going? What's going well? What needs to be improved? And what are the adjustments that we need to make? The PLC level is much closer to specific students and groups of students. They look at their professional learning community goals for instruction, both Tier 1 and Tier 2, and then they look at what does the data say and how is that going to drive future instruction. And then lastly, our Tier 2 and intervention students, how are we supporting at-risk students and what patterns are we seeing in their progress and what are the remaining needs? Who are the kids out there that we still need to go chase and support? So that kind of gives you a holistic view on every fall, winter, spring, the types of data cycles that we're doing. Now, let's get into the data. Fun times. So I'm going to begin, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation, focusing on grade level growth. Comparing West Bloomfield School District to what NWA says the growth should be in any given grade level based on RITs. RIT is that raw score that a student gets. So our 9th grade group, the NWA projection was 1.5 RIT on average, and we were at a 2. So we exceeded the national norm.
Is that from fall to winter?
Fall to winter, yep. 8th grade, the NWA projection was 2.4, West Bloomfield was at a 3. So in both cases, 8th and 9th grade in language arts exceeded the national projection for growth rates. That's encouraging. That means our teachers are doing their jobs, they're pushing kids and moving them forward. And also kids are doing their jobs and staying focused. Way to go, 9th graders. Who said 9th graders weren't focused? All right, next is 6th and 7th. So it's important to understand, like when you see this 2 and it's less in this gray bar, it doesn't mean that our kids didn't make growth. In fact, both our 6th and 7th grade groups demonstrated at least 2 points or higher of RIT growth. The 7th grade group just barely squeaked out and exceeded that projection. The 6th grade group is a little bit lower. You're probably wondering why, and that's natural. We're going to get to that in a little bit. We're not going to solve all those problems here tonight. That's not the purpose. But I am going to give you some additional data for context. Our 4th and 5th graders. You'll see our 4th grade group exceeded the national norm projection, and our 5th grade group is just below that projection. So still 4 points of RIT growth, but just below. We would want to see that, just at a quick glance, we'd want to see that a little bit higher. In kindergarten, 1st and 2nd and 3rd grade, this is going from lower to higher here. I went backwards this year from the end of the March to the beginning. You'll see that in all these cases, we have 9 points or higher of RIT growth, or 8 points or higher of RIT growth. Our kindergarten, 2nd, and 3rd grade exceeded those national projections. One thing that I think is pretty interesting, this 1st grade group with this 9 RIT average growth, their 1st grade, they're in the 75th percentile for achievement. So for all the schools in 1st grade groups that took that test, we're better than 75%. So even though we didn't quite meet that projection, when you look at the comparisons, we stack up pretty well. So what that means is that that shouldn't say 6th grade, what that should say is 1st grade. Our 1st grade students perform better than 62% of the students across the nation taking that test. So this is another way to look at that growth. This is the cohorts. So you'll notice here that 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, the percentage of kids that met their growth goal from last spring to now where they're on pace has increased. So 7% higher increase in 2nd grade, and we're halfway through the year. So I would expect that to go up even higher by the spring. That just shows that they're on track. Our 3rd grade, we have a 16% increase of the number of students that met their growth goal, which is really significant. You typically see 10%, that's what our goal is at a district level. 16 is far highly exceeding that. 7th grade, 18%. You see this 2%, that's a little bit behind schedule. If we want 10% increase, that's something to ask a question about. We'll look at that more in a little bit. This 5% is, I think, a good steady growth. If our goal is 10%, we're not far away, we're making progress. So you might be wondering what's going on in that first grade, that fourth grade, even this fifth grade where there's only 2%. We're going to look at that next. One thing I'd also like to say is that in any given grade level, 60% of the students reaching that growth goal is what NWA recommends. So let's talk about sixth grade, because that was one of the groups that didn't have as high a growth as we would expect. This is pretty interesting to me. This is the spring sixth grade group, 35% were projected proficient, or were proficient on the state assessment. This winter, 45% of our sixth graders are projected to be proficient. So that's a 10% jump. Now, I know what you're thinking, 45%, is that our standard in West Bloomfield? No, it's not. We want to be higher, but what's encouraging is the fact that we're seeing steady growth. We've seen that type of growth with that group pretty consistently. It's also encouraging when you look at some additional notes. We're in the 62nd percentile across the nation. So we're above the mean. We're making progress, and continuous growth is our goal. Trajectory lines, we want to just keep those moving this way. This is fourth and fifth grade. Those are those two other groups that we didn't see as much growth as we would have hoped for. And again, you're looking at the spring state proficiency in the light green for fifth grade. And this is actually cohorted data. So this fifth grade group, in the spring, they were 44% proficient. Now as fifth graders, they're 52% proficient. So that's an 8% jump with that cohort, which is a good jump for being halfway in the year. The current fourth grade group, last year they were 44% proficient, and right now projected to be 49%, 5% increase. So again, just to reiterate, are those the percentages that we want in the long run? No, we want those to be higher, and they're going to continue to rise. Is it progress? Yes. Fifth grade is in the 62nd percentile across the nation. Fourth grade is in the 57th. Both are above the mean. So next I'd like to talk a little bit about some tactical next steps. At the beginning of the presentation, I shared strategically what we know to be the case. When we talk about those proficiency levels, we know that's the case, and that's why we have those curricular review cycles going on. That's why we're piloting new resources and looking at the most current research with teachers. But what about like this year? What are some immediate things that we're doing to try to continue to push students further, and our staff? Our literacy leadership team, instructional literacy team, we meet monthly with Oakland schools. We get coaching from them. They come into the buildings, give us feedback on what they're seeing in instructional practices. We go to Oakland schools. They look at our continuous school improvement plan, our professional learning plan. We're going to continue to meet with them monthly from here to the end of the year. What's nice about them is that if we notice an erratic thing with data, they'll give a suggestion. Oftentimes those suggestions are very helpful for our teachers when it comes to how they're implementing practices. One thing I think we've done extremely well this year with our literacy coaches, learning services, building administrators, and PLC leaders is there's been very strong alignment in how we implement plans that we have at the building level and at the classroom level. And we're going to continue to focus on enhancing that alignment. I think you see that reflected in our board presentations from the schools. You'll notice that they're strikingly similar. That's not by accident. It's because we're all rowing in the same direction. We're working on reading interventionist coherency. You may or may not know we have at least one reading interventionist in each elementary building. We're really working on the coherency of that group. What are the consistent progress monitoring tools you're using to support at-risk students? What are the resources that you're using that are leveraging high results? And how can we look at data as a collective group? So that's a tactical next step that we're focusing on as well. Letters training continues to be a huge help. It's a 2-year cohort that our teachers look at the science of reading. When we talk about science of reading, we're looking at phonics and word study and how to recognize words, how to take that and also blend that with comprehension strategies. With over 70 teachers involved in that, That's great, that's been going on for a while, but what's been really helpful is literacy coaches sitting alongside of those teachers and saying, hey, how can we implement this tool tomorrow based on the data that you're seeing in your classroom? The pilots we've talked about a little bit, but what I think has been tactically helpful for both our elementary team, for literacy, and our secondary math team is rethinking how we provide Tier 1 instruction. That continues to happen on a daily basis when PLCs are meeting and when we're meeting with those committee groups. And I really think it's shifting. Tier 1 instruction used to look like this. We do the same for all. And they're really getting a better understanding what differentiated instruction looks like. IXL continues to help. Teachers are continuing to give personalized learning plans for kids based on their NWEA scores and different pathways. We're utilizing that with ELA for the first time this year. And we're currently reviewing students that will move from Laker Learning to K-5 STEAM based on their achievement in NWEA. And this is just a little bit of a highlight of how things are going with the pilot. One of the resources that the team is looking at is EL Education. We look at Ed Reports, which analyzes the quality of that resource, whether or not it meets expectations. And then what we do is we score based on different look-fors. This, for example, is UDL, Universally Designed for Learning. Things like engagement. Does it provide a guaranteed and viable curriculum? How's the vocabulary? What are the multilingual supports? How does it support with differentiated outcomes? The gray is the resource that we currently use. The green is the EL Education that we're piloting. So you can see across the board, the scores are significantly higher, which is very promising. This is the learner-centered component of our rubric. Access, what we're talking about is how is the information presented in a variety of ways in a multimodal access? What value do kids see in the assignments beyond school? How does it relate to the world around them? And how does the resource activate prior knowledge? So again, significant scores that are significantly higher than the resource that we've had for the past 7 years. Okay, secondary ELA, I mentioned that we're evaluating resources. It's been a big shift for that team to look at 5 years of achievement data, to look at what our parents are saying about secondary ELA instruction, what our students are saying about it, versus what our perception is as educators. We've looked at neighboring districts. We've gone out and done some site visits that are using different resources. That's been very eye-opening. This right here gives you a picture of how we're scoring different resources compared to what we currently have. StudySync, for example, when it comes to offering abundant and diverse reading opportunities, crushes what we're currently doing in terms of the percent rating. And then these are different components as well, like Universally Designed for Learning. You can see that we scored at like 54% with the current resources that we have. The other two, StudySync and My Perspectives, are significantly higher, above that 75% range. One thing I'll say is that curricular resources are helpful. That doesn't eliminate the need for teachers to understand standards and instructional strategies. So when we look at resources, we couple those two things together. Because if you just follow a book blindly and don't look at the students in front of you, the resource is not very helpful. The resource is only helpful when you look at data and the kids in front of you. I'm going to transition next to math, and we're going to look at math data in a very similar vein. And then we'll land the plane here in a second. Okay, so again, we're looking at average grade level growth, that RIT growth compared to what NWEA projected, and you can see that our 9th and 8th grade students are right on par. 8th grade exceeding by almost a full point. 9th grade right on par with the national projection. 6th and 7th both demonstrated at least 3 points or higher of average RIT growth. 6th exceeded the expectation, 7th is a little bit below. We're going to look at that in more detail in a second. 5th grade and 4th grade both exceeded the national projection. The 2-point growth or the 1.4 in 4th grade is really encouraging. Then this breaks down K through 3. So let's talk a little bit about 7th through 9th grade. You saw that 9th grade, when it came to the average RIT growth, was identical to what NWEA projected. So we're right where we need to be, but we always want to be a little bit higher than that. That 7th grade group was a little bit lower. These are our math cohorts and the percent of increase in a cohort. So the 7th grade group Last year, they were 7% lower in the number of kids that were proficient in math. So that's a good increase for this mid part of the year. The 8th grade group, they're 19% higher than where they were last year. And this 9th grade group is projected to be 31% higher. So those are really good, encouraging things. These seem like ridiculously high. It almost makes me like slap myself in the face. Right now, it's too early to say what the reasoning is behind that. I will say, these are areas where we are piloting new resources and talking a lot about high quality instruction. The resource is a huge shift from CPM. If anyone's familiar with college prep math, which is what we used to use, it's a significant shift that provides, the biggest differences is more explicit and scaffolded instruction for students, whereas CPM was highly inquiry and team-based. The new resource Reveal does have some inquiry in it, but it's less just revolving around teams working together. There is some teamwork and collaboration, but there's also a lot of independent work and partner work as well. Okay, so this here is our percentile rankings and achievement for math, K through 6. You'll see that these percentile rankings are pretty good, right? They're exactly where we need to be. The lowest one is 59 percentile, meaning that we're performing better than 59% of the schools in 3rd grade. The rest of them are 60% or higher. Kindergarten and 1st grade look really great. That reinforces what we've seen historically with our achievement data with math at the early elementary. And so next I'm going to talk about some tactical next steps. I mentioned earlier, the elementary team is going to evaluate the Bridges curriculum and the achievement data. Our elementary math team, we formed a team of teachers from different buildings that's exploring leadership initiatives for math instruction, our pacing, our vertical alignment, and how we're providing intervention from a classroom teacher. You know that we don't have math interventionists. We do have reading interventionists, not math. So what does it look like to make sure that our teachers are pulling groups of kids in the classroom and targeting instruction there? How do we continue to get better at that? They meet after school about once per month, and then they take that work back to their professional learning communities. We did this year, you may have heard the asynchronous professional learning on Canvas on November 27th. The teachers had a window of time to do that. We had a really heavy emphasis on what the Bridges components include, and so there was asynchronous PD on the Bridges math tools, on this Bridges podcast that many of the teachers didn't even know existed, and their digital resource. It's more for teacher practices, it's not for students. A deep dive into the Bridges Math Intervention Program. We're continuing IXL with our students in math, and we're getting ready to increase the number of kids in our Level Up Math and Advanced Math. We've had a really steady growth of that. I think that also plays a role in our secondary improvement, just raising the bar for our students and having high expectations. I mentioned earlier that our secondary team is piloting Reveal. One thing I didn't mention is that another piece of Reveal Math, in addition to the textbook and the consumable, is something called ALEX. Very similar to IXL, but it provides different pathways for students based on how they do on the assessments within the units. So IXL is typically more aligned to NWA. Sometimes it gets aligned to a different curriculum. ALEX links to both. Focusing a lot on formative assessment, like how do we notice whether or not kids are meeting expectations before they get to the end of the unit test, so we're not waiting too long. The workbook that's provided for Reveal goes home with students. They take it back and forth. I think it's a nice tool compared to the CPM book which stayed in the classroom. The kids can actually write in the workbook, take their notes in there and everything. That's been helpful. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from students about the resource. Adil, Azo, and Sonia went out and did a listening tour with how many? 100 students, I think? 100 middle school students about what they thought about the resource. It was really cool to hear how refreshing the resource has been for them. We also have some big plans for the summertime. We're already planning elementary summer learning. I know it's 10 degrees outside, but we're planning that, and we're really focusing on our K-5 at-risk students for the elementary. Students that are economically disadvantaged, that are below proficiency in reading and math, and we're going to provide that instruction in ELA and math for them. Our goal is to have about 100 K-5 students. That's a jump from 75 last summer. Middle school summer learning, we're gonna focus on our rising sixth graders that are at risk, whether it be academically, socioeconomically, with a heavy focus on ELA and math. They're already in the process of identifying those students. We're offering a middle school bridges program for all of our students to come. The idea behind that is before they set foot in that campus of day one of school, they'll have a half day on campus with teacher leaders and student leaders just to get themselves comfortable in the environment. I know that doesn't feel like a direct correlation to academic achievement, but when kids feel comfortable, when they feel safe, and we increase the sense of belonging, it's not gonna be such a tough start, especially for our sixth graders, where we see the data struggles the most. High school summer learning, we're focusing on credit recovery, which is pretty much the standard apparatus that we've been doing, making sure that kids recoup grades, and then we're doing credit advancement and health and PE. And then I just put this on here because with everything that we're doing, we're always focusing on these priority objectives. We're not trying to chase shiny objects or see one data point is, oh, we better go do that. We're staying the course and we're trying to be as consistent as possible. We're gonna take the Eagles Super Bowl model. And that concludes my presentation.
That's great. Anyone have any follow-up questions or comments on the data?
Couple of comments and a question. One, I love the middle school bridging program. Change is hard, and so taking some of that change out earlier so they feel comfortable, so I really, really enjoy that. I like seeing the information about the pilot as well, so we've heard about it, so just to kind of see where that, the ELA is, or the EL is ranking. My question is, with the leveling up, Matt, the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned additional data points that will be, sorry, I'm trying to find the page. Additional data points that will be gathered.
Or like at our-
Systems approach, right?
Yep.
Alright, so you're looking at risk data. With more students or some students doing that leveling up, does that skew some of the data? And so do you pull that out to make sure that we aren't missing some of the at risk, right? So like, if a fifth grader all of a sudden we're seeing a jump and you were like, it's almost too good to be true, right? Is that because we have more people?
Because there's less kids in fourth grade and more in fifth grade.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that'd
and
be
so-
something that I would look to make sure
Yep.
that we aren't missing some, because some of it's helping push that percentages up. I just wanna make sure we're not missing some of the students that are
So when you
falling
get as you get deeper and deeper in the level, specifically at the PLC level, they're looking like student by student, group by group, and it pulls each kid's name, where they're at in terms of mastery for standards and what they need to learn next. We also have at every building level a master sheet of, like at the start of the year, we identify at-risk students based on their spring data and their attendance and their socioeconomic status. And that spreadsheet is a running spreadsheet, so they're able to pull where are kids at, who have we missed, who have we not considered.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, on the secondary ELL next steps slide, the percentage rating from stakeholders, the current reality, and then study sync in my perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about, just dig more into my, current reality means that's what we're using.
That's correct. So current reality is like based on the resources that we have currently before we pilot, what is the percentage ranking for these components? So
Who ranks these?
we get stakeholder data from our parents. So we
Okay.
actually ask them questions about the resources from our students, from our teachers, and from our administrators.
Okay,
Yep.
got that.
And then also we look at achievement data as well.
And so what are the other two?
So this here is reading opportunities. Study Sync, in my perspectives, are ones that we could potentially pilot.
So on that other chart, how are we getting feedback?
On those, so those are not based on our current reality. It could be a potential future reality. So we rate those based on vendor presentations, based on site visits, and based on research around the resource.
So those numbers are from your team?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, if not, that's not a number that McGraw-Hill gives to
I thought it was an
us.
outside, like say.
Yeah, no, we
another-
score it based on what we see from the
Yeah.
vendor and what we see on the sites.
I thought it was the other schools who are using it, that was their scoring of it. It's not their scoring of it, it's your scoring
Correct.
based on the data that you've got.
Yes,
Thank you.
yep, great question. Hi,
That was a good presentation, thank you.
thank you.
And I enjoyed hearing it, and I just wanna say, I'd like to kind of leave it open. If I have additional questions, I can come back later, so. Just a quick question on the, summer opportunities. So when we think about it, you talk a little bit about identifying those at-risk, students at the beginning of the year, and then also at the end of the year, because we're talking about summer programs. So when we look at the culture of what it means to be at risk, because a lot of learning happens when a student feels safe and appreciated. Whether they're the great student or a poor student, if you will, or a student that's challenged, as you say, for. So how do we make this summer program something that is truly exceptional for those students that were identified? Couple of questions: is transportation offered? Is there a culture component that we're using to kind of level set all students to feel accepted within school? Is there a community component that we have that we can reach out to families and say, we need your help in helping this student? And again, looking at how we make a student feel accepted within the school so they can feel safe to learn as well.
So transportation is not provided. There was a time when we had lots of money with ESSER where we could afford to cover those costs. Culture component, one of the things our teachers and the staff that are gonna be there take pride in is day one, and it's an accelerated pace, right? Like you're talking 3 to 4 weeks of intensive instruction, but the staff that we hire, which are our staff, are gonna focus on creating a sense of belonging from day one. And that's just by when you look at a normal school year, you create culture building activities and connectors and icebreakers and help the kids feel connected to each other and to the teachers. So that will be no different. And then the community component, one thing that I think is a constant staple is just like our staff right now sends home weekly newsletters to families, that continues. There's also a component, at least once during that time period, they bring the families in and share some resources and ways that they can work with their kids.
One of the things too, Scott, is that I know that some families, while we assume have internet access or read mail or can have access to email accounts, just again, juggling up different ways where we can reach families, because not everybody truly does have that. And sometimes it's the struggling students that you find that may not have the rich resources that others take for granted at home, so just keeping that in mind.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll go and then you can go. So, how are our kids level of math? Are they showing success?
They're doing great. This is anecdotally, I was talking to a teacher who is teaching 5th grade, and she said her 4th graders that are leveling up are running circles around a lot of the 5th graders in the class. So they're hitting their groove. I've heard of one student that it just didn't work out for, but when you look at the sheer volume of kids that we pushed up, it's been very successful.
It's just a curiosity question. I know during COVID, there was efforts on our end to provide Wi-Fi to our students so they could participate. I know Pontiac does it citywide. I know West Bloomfield doesn't. But is there still a Wi-Fi access contingency out there, whether it's through us or other resources
We have-
that you know of?
Yeah, we have a number that are available, a small amount, and if we know that internet access is a problem for families, then, then,
Yeah, right, yeah.
then we'll check it out to them if it's needed. Yeah.
I remember
And everyone
that
has a
resource.
device, has access to have a device at home.
Right.
In terms of the internet capacity, if we have a limited number that are still available, yes.
We've actually, so you saw some of the board presentations from schools where they've had these IXL challenges and targeted challenges for our students in Laker Learning. So there's been families that have reached out to principals and said, hey, I want to do this challenge, but I'm struggling with a hotspot. Those have been given in those circumstances.
Thank you.
What do we have, stakes that we give them, how do we?
It's, they're called, I don't, what are they, they used to call them Khajiits, but it's just it's basically, what are they called?
Portable
It's a
hotspot.
hotspot, I'm sorry, a
Portable
hotspot.
hotspot.
I couldn't think of the name.
We bought a bunch during COVID. So the other thing, I just wanna, just curiosity, but are we seeing a high use of IXL or is it in pockets?
Yeah, so we just did a data analysis at a district level with IXL. They walked us through a few things we should pay attention to. We had one school where the usage was a little bit lower, the 3 other schools through the roof. And then what happens, so like we develop our professional learning plan with our instructional leadership team, we built in time for professional learning communities to analyze that data. So they're actually, I think they just did that at their last PLC, looking at what's our usage rate for groups of students. They can analyze all that and then reach out to families and say, hey, step it up, or here's what we're seeing.
So are you seeing a direct correlation of using IXL with their proficiency of growth scores?
Well, I
Or
mean,
not yet?
it's interesting that, like, we started to see some achievement growth about 2 years ago in math. We had bridges for 3 years prior, and that achievement seemed to coincide with the implementation of IXL. I think it's too early to tell for sure, but we are seeing rises.
I have one more follow-up question. You have state data, do you have Oakland County data? How we compare with Oakland County, knowing that our enrollment's down, just wanna make sure.
So NWA does national rankings, but it doesn't break it down by county and state.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Nice. Thank you very much, Scott. Those are
Thanks for
good-
your attention, I
good-
appreciate it.
Good numbers. Looking forward now
Lots
to
of
the
work to do
spring.
still, yeah.
It'll probably be June, right? Is it June or August?
Uh,
Is that again?
June,
June.
yeah,
Thank you, Scott.
thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot to celebrate, Scott, so yay you and your team.
Yes.
Yeah.
Working hard. Yeah, lots of work.
Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 4, it's our 24-25 budget amendment 1 update. So Ms. Nancy Hoover will present.
There. Oh, that one, yeah. I was going to. Why I wasn't going to, because you don't have to, yeah. Gotcha.
You're perfect, so.
Far from it.
Pretty close though, Scott.
Thank you.
Yeah, Liz, thank you. It's another thing. Part-time.
Good evening. Good evening. So we have our first amendment for 24-25, the general fund.
Oh, turn.
There we go. Okay. So at fiscal year end, at June 30th, 24, we had a fund balance of $14,403,956. This was 17% of revenues and 17.59% of expenditures. As you know, the board policy is to maintain 15% of expenditures. Our original budget, we projected that we would use about 6.9% of fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. When we incorporated our final audited fund balance, the projected fund balance was adjusted and we were looking at about 14.8. So what we do typically is when we first do our original budget for the year, so in this case for 24-25, we're estimating what we think the fund balance is gonna be. Then after we go through our audit in the summer and we get our final audited number, then we go through as part of the First Amendment, which we're doing right now, and we adjust that beginning fund balance to what it actually came out with the audited results. So once we did that, we were looking at about 14.8, so just a little under the 15. Our original budget, we included a per pupil increase of $200, and that was based on a blended membership of 4,680. So when we do the budget, we use the blended membership, which, just as a refresher, that's 10% of the spring count and 90% of the fall count. We use that in our budget because that is what we actually get paid on, versus using a head count or just the fall count. Based on the unaudited fall count, we are looking at a blended membership right now of 4,765. Again, it's unaudited. It could shift a little, but we're not expecting it to go too much either way. That is 85, that's a blended count of 85 more than we originally budgeted for. So we actually did better than what was expected. What did happen though, again, we adopted our budget before we had a budget from the governor. So it ended up that they did not include a per pupil increase. I think most districts in the state were caught by that. And what they, but what did help was that we did do 85 students better. So it was a shift between those two things, about a loss of around 50,000 based on what we projected. So not too bad considering we didn't get a foundation increase. Some of the significant budget changes that we made for the First Amendment, again, we adjusted for the loss of the 200 per student. We adjusted for the 85 students, and then we adjusted, as I mentioned, we adjusted our beginning fund balance to equal what was the audited number. And then they did, because they didn't give us the $200, they did give us monies that was to equate to a 5% reduction in the MIPSRS rate. So they didn't actually change the rate. We're still charging the same rate to our employees, but they gave us a lump of money to say, hey, if you didn't charge that, if you didn't have to pay that rate, this is the amount of money you would get. So we did get that money. They also changed our UAL. For a number of years now, they have been giving us a large amount of money for retirement, and then they turn around and ask us to pay it back. So we had been getting just over $7 million, and so we inflate our revenue and we inflate our expenditures. It has zero effect on the fund balance. They give us the money and we turn around and pay it back. They reduced that to, right now it's just under $4 million that we're getting. So then again, that reduces our expenditures and reduces our revenue. Again, no effect on the fund balance. They also gave us this year, something that you're probably familiar with, a one-time MIPSRS deposit. And what that is they give it to us one time. Again, we increase our revenue, we increase our expense, and we pay that back to them. So that was about little over $800,000. Again, it's supposed to be one time, but they said that 2 years ago, and now they're doing it again. So we don't know, maybe we'll get it again. Again, no effect on fund balance. And then the other changes, our staff increases, they were negotiated and approved after the original budget was adopted. So we went in and we've made changes for those. And then we recently had a very large increase in insurance costs. And so we have had a number of staff have changed their insurance coverage, either going, change. We always have people changing from family to two-person or single to two-person or family. But we had a few more at this time changing from having insurance to not accepting insurance, and then they get cash in lieu is what we pay them. So we've gone through and we've made those changes too, and that happens in our open enrollment in November. We find out that information in December, and then we make those changes too. Okay, so this is our proposed general fund budget. In this chart, you can see the actual for 22-23, the actual for 23-24, where we're at with our original budget, the amended amounts, and you can see that top number. You can see we had originally projected an $11.4 million fund balance. after it was audited, was 14.4 million. And then the final column is our variance to the original budget. So with this amendment, we are looking at a fund balance of 16.24% of revenues, and 15.95% of expenditure. So with this amended budget, we are just a little bit over the board goal. Okay, and then this is the summary of the changes to the budgeted revenues and expenditures. And you can see by function, which is how we're required to report our expenditures, which is determined by the state. You can see the different categories. For the total overall expenditures, we have reduced the expenditures by $157,000. One of the things I want to point out, which is very important in education, is under our expenditures, the top line is basic programs, and that is the instruction at the elementary, middle, high school, our programs. And it shows a $1.6 million reduction in expenditures. And I just want to be clear, that is not because we've reduced expenditures or taken teachers or anybody else out of the classroom. When I talked about the UAL, it went from just over 7 million and it went down to just under 4 million. Because the majority of our salaries are in instruction, when you reduce that amount out for the retirement, it really makes it look like we've taken a lot of money out of basic and programs, but that is where the majority of our salaries are. So I just want to be clear, we did not take money out of the class, we haven't taken money out of the classroom or reduced teachers or anything like that in that area. Some things coming up for the Second Amendment, we kind of draw a line in the sand and say, okay, we're going to stop making changes so we can get everything complete and finished. We have received a FAFSA grant, $415,000, and it's to increase the FAFSA. We're going to help to increase the FAFSA completion for students. This money, it's going to offset some salaries, and we have gotten approval. This will probably carry over for 3 years. Oh, for 2 years. It's going to carry over 2 years. So we will not spend all of this money in this year. We're going to spend some this year, and we're going to spend some next year. And we have a lot of really great things planned for the students. We have received $128,000 for the Filter First grant. So now all consumable water in our district, it's required to be filtered. So that's the drinking fountains. And then again, in the kitchens, any water that we're using to wash vegetables or anything like that, all has to be filtered. So we've received this grant to help us out with that. There was a 2023 Stronger Connections grant that we didn't meet the qualifications for, but the second cohort we actually have. So we received $155,000 for that, and that goes towards mental health supports, and that will go to offset some of the salary that we're currently paying in that area. And then the final one is a potential change. There's a House Bill 6058, and that is an increase to the hard cap contribution for health insurance. Again, the hard cap did not go up very much, but the insurance cost did go up. Again, it doesn't affect the district, but it does affect our staff. And it was quite a large increase. So there is a House bill out there. We're not sure if it's going to pass or when it's going to go into effect, but that could affect how much the district has to pay towards medical insurance. Again, if it goes into effect, they've talked about April 1st, so that would only be 3 months in this year that we would pay. So it wouldn't be a big effect on this year, but it would be a big effect on next fiscal year.
Can I ask a question about that one?
Yes.
Is that something that you're gonna have to apply for, or it's just gonna be allocated based on?
The House bill?
Yeah.
Oh,
I have
no,
to do
so-
some research on it, but I was just.
so the contribution, so we just get, every year they tell us what the hard cap is.
That I know, but like
Right.
this
This is,
to offset.
we have to pay, so basically what it's saying is, say the hard cap is set at 22.
Oh, I thought they were trying to,
It's going up.
I thought they were trying to help reduce it
So
for
no,
teachers.
it
No.
puts more,
That's on us.
the district has to cover that difference of the old hard cap and the new hard cap.
I misunderstood, I thought they were trying to help
No.
teachers.
Well, the other
Oh,
one
they
is
are.
the 3%.
Okay.
They're helping staff, it's helping
But- but
individuals.
not more.
Yes,
Yes.
it's
Okay.
helping
It will help.
individuals.
I thought they were trying to throw
Yeah.
money in. Okay,
But without giving us money.
okay, got it, I got it. Unfunded.
Unfunded.
Yeah. Anybody else have any?
Yep, that was-
Okay.
Thank you. So just looking at, again, revenue, so we know state, revenue comes from local, state, it's pretty much done now. That's what you're saying. It's looking like it's gonna look and we're gonna stay there. Is that kind of what you're saying about revenue?
For our foundation allowance, yes, but as we saw last year, the grants just keep rolling in.
Yeah,
So-
outside of grants and things like
Yes,
that, but
so
from the
yeah.
state, we're pretty good. So if I look at expenditures and I'm looking at, I'm gonna hit the pupil support services. And that is up, so the expenditures within that category are things that we can control within the district. So,
We can, some things are contractual, and based on what our teacher contract says, we could have, minimums that we have to, based on the number of students, minimums that we have to, and some of them are controlled.
okay, so if I'm looking at pupil support services, it's looking like the net change, it's taken an increase of almost $800,000. What would that line, why would that increase about $800,000?
When we go through the budget, we for the First Amendment, we do the best we can in the original budget, trying to get costs in the right buckets. And that's just a function of shifting some costs to get them in the right areas.
So I'll ask a different, so can you describe what's in pupil support
So
services?
people, that's our psychologists, our social workers, our speech pathologists, everybody, all those types, physical therapists, those type services.
Okay, so we saw an increase, meaning that, I guess I'm confused.
This might help.
Mhm.
There might be more kids that are requiring services, so you have to increase the amount of people servicing the kids.
Is that,
That's part of it, yeah.
okay,
Yep.
and at the tune of 800, that's a big increase based on, where we were and what we,
Well, if you consider that, it could be 4 teachers. Fully loaded.
okay.
All in.
Did we add those,
No.
we didn't add those positions.
I don't have it in front of me, so I'm sorry, because
Yeah,
I don't have the document, but we have not added in those areas, but what I'm guessing is that they were probably coded in the wrong account.
Yeah, it's just
And move, like,
maintenance.
so part of preparing for the First Amendment is Nancy and I work very closely together and we go line by line to make sure each teacher is coded in the right place. So we have not really added staff in those areas at all, actually, over what we were last year. We haven't added any FTE.
Is it because grants may have,
It can be, yes, because we
grants
do,
paid for it last year, maybe not this year, or
we
is that?
shift people in
Okay.
grants accounts, like, there's a lot of reasons why account numbers change, like, when you look at the book, it's this thick, right, of account numbers, so. Deborah, maybe to that question, I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know, but
Yeah.
that can also be part of it, is we also are making sure that we clean up those, between HR and the business office.
Yeah.
And that can shift things around sometimes.
And I would just expect for it to offset in other lines, so if I see
Yeah, I
an
don't-
increase of 8, it was, what I'm saying, if it's realignment, it would
Well,
go.
But it can be, they're coming out of
Come out of basic
grants, some people are
programming.
going into
Did
grants,
it, could it come out of basic programming?
yes,
Regular
Yes.
it can.
It can come in there if we have people, maybe in not the
Yeah,
right
the
code,
basic
and so then we
program's
put them
gone
up.
down by 1.6.
Yes, yep, and part of that is the UAL, and
Yeah.
part of it is moving people around. The main goal with the original budget when we do it is to make sure that we have every person accounted for, and all their benefits accounted for. Like, that's the main goal. And then we use the amendment to maybe fix it up and make sure everybody is in the right bucket.
I have a quick question. Thank you for some of the back information, I appreciate it. When I'm looking at the original budget with the fund balance, was 11%. But then when we're doing the amendment, we're up to 16.24. Can you just quickly explain again, historical for me, how we were at 11 and then jumping up?
So again, when you look at the original budget and you look at the very first line where it says beginning fund balance July 1st, and you see 11 million, that's an estimate. Okay, so the first thing we do with the amendment is we true it up to what the audited fund balance was. And you can see the audited fund balance was 14.4 million.
Yeah, and that was based because you guys were conservative, because you didn't know where the state would, I mean,
No, it's, yeah,
It's a timing
we
thing.
tend to be a little
There
conservative, but.
was 3 different budget, business managers who touched last year's budget.
that's fair, okay.
So I mean, but usually you're gonna see a swing, and MSBO, and this has been in many MESB trainings, is it's normal to see a 3 to 8% shift. You better make sure it's to the positive, right? Because exactly, so that's the issue. So the audit, we don't get the audited numbers till October, November. What you're seeing in the original budget that says the 11.4 million, we have to set that in June. When we don't get, because we're still paying bills for the last fiscal year into July and August, making sure to close out the books on that previous year. We need to get closer, obviously, because it was a significant swing, but.
Part of that was the students.
Yeah,
It was like
well,
80 students.
Yeah, part of,
Which is a
there's
good
a
thing.
lot of
Way more
factors,
than we
yeah. So, that's why the original budget, will always be slightly different than Amendment 1 in terms of fund balance. When we have to set the original budget in June, because by law, the board has to pass the budget in June.
But the state doesn't have to tell us how to fund it.
But then, we give you the audited numbers.
Totally.
Yeah,
I know,
that's
that's
crazy,
crazy.
yeah, it's a fair question, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think this year is gonna be complicated as
Without
well.
being.
But because you have it divided, it's between the house and the.
Oh, you mean from the state?
Yeah,
from
from
the
the
state.
state. I think it's gonna be, yeah, I just.
Not us.
Oh, yeah.
Just having a clear picture of what we
No, the
made.
state, you just never know, so, yeah. you
Well,
just
that's,
kinda
yeah, I
hope.
think it's easy. Anybody have any more questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy, appreciate that.
The Nancy should be the third.
Okay, now we're gonna go to budget to actual review on agenda item number 5, and Nancy will present this now.
Oh, there you go. So here's our budget to actual for January. You can see it still includes the original budget because the board has not, so how I try to be consistent, and until the board approves the First Amendment, I don't put those numbers in here. So, we're starting out, some of the bigger variances we're looking at. And again, the first we have, local property taxes. Last year, you're seeing it was negative 5%. There was actually a budget amendment after, this was after January, that affects that 5%. So their, local revenue, the budget was low last year and they increased it up. So the 12.4% that we're looking at now is really more reflective of where you should be with your tax revenue at this point during the year. We do a summer collection, so the majority of our taxes are already here, at this point. And we typically don't go over, so that's that issue. Under federal, revenue, again, we have a lot less revenue, federal revenue this year than we have in years past because ESSER is now fully spent. We have actually had a couple grants that we have fully spent and have received the money. We actually went out and did some really quick draws right before they cut us off. So we were very excited to get that money in. So that's why we're doing a little better than last year. Under pupil support services, we're looking at 49, and you saw that we have we made a large adjustment in pupil support services. So that will come more in line because we really shouldn't be at 49% right now. We should be over 50 because Those are the majority of those individuals are teachers. Teachers have not been paid 50% yet, because again, their pay goes through August. So there's 4 pays, 2 in July, 2 in August. Those come back to this year. So you always, when you're looking at teachers, whereas like my salary, I am over half paid now, a teacher is not half paid yet. So that's kind of how, when you're looking at those percentages, that's how you need to look at that. Then, let's see, we're looking at business services. We have a contract with Oakland Schools. And we have, this year we were a little more timely making those payments. So that's why we're looking at our expenditures are at 42 versus last year they had 70%. They had not paid those contractual payments to Oakland Schools at this point last year. We did make them by the end of the year, so it was all good. In transportation, we have not yet paid the December and January Durham bills. So that is why we're showing a little extra expenditure there. Other essential support. Again, we have a contract with Oakland Schools, and we're just a little off on, last year we had made those payments later than we did this year. We made them a little earlier. And then in our final, other financing uses, we had a larger budgeted amount last year in the transfer that we make to our community services fund. That ended up later in the year last year getting reduced. So at this point, the budgeted amount in last year was quite high. That's why we had 87% left. But then with, you'll see next time, I'm gonna put the amended budget, and then I'll have the amended budget for last year, and that percentage will go down because we adjusted that amount. So otherwise, once we get the amended budget in there, we're pretty good where we're at. Any questions?
So when you put the amended budget, you're gonna do away with the original budget or have it in for historical records from this point on? You'll put the amended budget that we will soon vote on and we'll calculate from there.
Yes, yes I will.
Thank you, Nancy. Agenda item number 6 is our review of the 2023 bond series to the sale. And by the way, we'll be taking the amendment budget to the board all February 2nd. Stacy, what?
Quick question, so we haven't paid the December and January Durham bills. Is that because we have some sort of?
You have to ask Nancy. You can ask Nancy that, I don't know that.
No, they submitted them late.
Okay, thank you.
That was it.
Okay, I'm tired.
Is it still Durham?
Your billing would be
Is it still Durham? I thought they, okay.
Well, they've had transitions in transportation too, so,
Yeah.
They did, they have a new person in there, and so.
yeah. Okay, so you guys can proceed. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. When we approved the 2023 bond, it was approved to sell in 3 series. So back on May 8th of 2023, the board approved selling of Series 1, which generated $78 million. This sale is Series 2, which is expected to generate $47 million. And then the last series will be sold in 2027, which will round out our $148 million bond at $23 million. Our bond attorney Troon worked with PFM, our financial advisor, to develop the resolution for bond sales. If it's approved at the February 24th meeting, we would sell those on Wednesday, April 23rd at 10:30 a.m. would be the sale of the bonds. And they want to get these on the street with all the uncertainty in Washington and everything. The PFM's telling us that we want to get this sold as soon as possible.
Does anyone have any questions regarding?
I have a clarifying question, sorry. As I was rereading this, this is just work that has been specified in the bond language. We're not curtailing it to do other work possibly.
Correct, this is just, it was approved as 3 series.
Yeah, the ballot.
The ballot language.
Yeah, I mean, because ballot language is what you're held to from the Department of Treasury. So the application are estimates based on that point in time. So it's the ballot language that you are required to follow through on with regards to a qualified bond, which is what we have.
But so for spirit transparency, for the taxpayers that voted on what we projected the bond to be,
It's, yeah.
That's what we're
yeah,
expecting.
yeah,
It comes from the ballot.
It comes
Okay,
from,
that's
but
what we're
that's what they
There's
vote
no
on.
changes on
That's what,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, this is just the financial component of series 2 of the 3 series.
thank you.
It's all aligned.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions on that? Okay, well, this will be on the February board meeting. Thank you very much. Number 7 on our agenda is the MASB Board of Directors candidate discussion. So, at this time, I know you've received emails on this. Many of them, some from MASB and some from individual candidates. And we will take action and select one from it's one vote from our board. And I know that you probably have reviewed your candidate selection for elections. This is one cabinet position on MASB Board of Directors. So I would just like to put it out in the room, in a discussion, if anyone has a certain candidate that they feel the other board members should take a second look at or look at. Anybody else? Has anybody looked at them?
I have.
Look at them.
And I want to some too, so, just from my discussions with a few of them, I happen to have class with one or two. So, Roderick Means, again, looking at those qualifications. Another candidate would be, again, Ursula Rogers, looking at those qualifications. And then we also have our neighbor, who is right down the street, which is Anisha. So, again, I've talked to 2 of those 3, and they, certainly expressed, desires and wants, so I could throw out those 3 names.
Yeah, I'll be honest, the first one that jumped out to me was Roderick. Probably the only one that jumps out with me. But if I'm being honest, please don't put that in your board update, because that's not fair to those other candidates, but.
No, but I mean, but he gave us a good reading, and then he, campaigned, if you will, had a good discussion.
And I've been in many sessions with them over the years with MASG, so yes. But if anyone else has somebody you want us to look at, it's kind of like a clunky process, but.
I go to them. Yeah.
You know, anyone else we wanna look at?
Did Oakland County School Board Association, did they put out, I know that they were gonna do a panel?
They were gonna probably put out a video, I
Right.
think it's right after this.
Okay.
Wait, what date was it, 10?
I just saw it, 'cause I was.
Was it 10? How about I put it this, we'll count on doing Roderick, if somebody wants to
tomorrow.
if somebody wants to have a discussion to look at somebody else, then we should call attention to that and be ready for, we can even have that discussion at the board table, next, at our board meeting, but,
Okay.
does that sound good for everybody? I know it's a clunky process, it feels awkward, but I don't know another way to do it. Anybody, good? Okay, is that good? Okay. So I would say after you watch the videos, so you're not like campaigning for anyone, just let me know, and I will tell the board, please look at these 3 videos, or 2 videos, or whatever. How's that sound?
Yes.
That's fair, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we're good with the suggestion that's already been,
Then we'll just made it, we'll
just
make that as
say,
the
I
motion.
agree, okay.
Okay? Or don't even
No,
say that,
don't
cause
say I
you're,
agree.
no, that's, just
I'm
tell me,
correct.
just let me
You're right.
know, and I
Yeah.
will,
Thank you.
I will process it. Is that fair? Okay. Alright. Thank you for that. Feels a little weird. Number 8 is good for the order. Anybody? Okay.
I just wanna say thank you for, I PD'd out, not gonna lie.
I don't think you're not alone in that.
But we had the governance meeting, there were some harder conversations, but I thank you for the opportunity that we'll be reviewing the social contract and that we'll be doing work, so I thank you for that.
I'll just say that there's a lot coming up in the district, and it would be wonderful if, and I'm thinking about how I can do this, we've tried this in the past, of maybe putting out calendar invites so that those big items in the district, that we can have at least one board member show up to certain activities, or at least know, so we're not all at one, and then missing some other things. And I know we've tried it in the past, and I think I might put it back out there, because we're getting back into our fine arts season and all of that, so, I'll let you guys know if I can figure out how to do that best, where we know that there's a board member, or we'll know, we don't, that one's covered, maybe I should go to that one. Does everybody understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm gonna try and do that.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Because I have people coming up, you know, they're so appreciative of work members are there.
Okay.
So, that'll be wonderful. Okay, then item number 9 is our closed session, superintendent mid-year evaluation. I need a motion for that.
I move to go into closed session for purpose of the superintendent mid-year evaluation check-in under section H1A of the Open Meetings Act.
Just a second. Actually, now I need a roll call. Art?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay.
Yes.
We'll take a 5.
It's 8:14.
Wait, did we do 8:10 to come in here? We were here for more than 4 minutes. I wrote down the wrong time. Does anyone know what time we went in? Oh, I'm sure Liz wrote it down.
Listen.
It was before 7:54.
Okay, I don't know where I wrote 8:10 from. I have no
We'll get it
idea.
from this.
Okay. She has it. So item number 10 is our continuation of current goal discussion. So at this point, this is one of those new things that is mandated by the new law for superintendent evaluation, which is aligned with teacher evaluation, where we just, as a board, say we're gonna continue on the path of our current goals for the district. And that's what I'm mandated to say. Does anyone have any comments about that? Okay, that's what I figured. So, it feels weird, but that's what it is. Okay, agenda item number 11 is adjournment, and it is 8:15.
Diane?
I'd like to say something.
I did.
Sorry.
And I didn't say this for good for the order, but I meant to. I'm so glad we got a new club. I mean, I think.
I started questioning whether I knew it was right, because
I think that's so fantastic, so.
I
That's your bond now or
I mean, I guess,
Actually, I
fine.
never let you from the.
So I am so happy about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is, I don't know why I wrote 8:10 somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's a good thing.
So,
Alright, well, good, thank you.
I'm gonna say,
It's nice to know what that was.
Yeah.
Does anybody really know?
I didn't.